Hello and welcome to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. 27 out of 32 members of River State House of Assembly defect from the People's Democratic Party (PDP) to the opposition All Progressives Congress (APC). On the interview segment for today, we focus on Dangote Refinery, appropriate pricing and product availability with a startup business lawyer and financial analyst Omori Adogawari as our guest. Welcome to Politics Tonight. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Politics Tonight, digging beyond the headlines. Now let's begin with some developments in the polity. The People's Democratic Party has demanded that the Independent National Electoral Commission should immediately commence the process of conducting fresh elections into the 27 state constituencies in Rivers State. President Bola Tinubu has asked the military to step up their counterinsurgents activity in areas where homegrown terrorists have continued to displace lives and livelihoods. President Tinubu gave this charge in Maiduguri, Borno State during the annual Chief of Army Staff Conference. Our correspondent, Jesse Tafida, reports.
First Chief of Army Staff Annual Conference under the leadership of Lieutenant General Taurid Lagbaja. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is a special guest of honor. This conference serves as a platform for the military to chart a way forward on how best to improve their operational strategy for effective service delivery. To start with, President Tinubu restates his administration's commitment in ensuring a peaceful nation for his citizens. But he wants the army to be more proactive in the fight against criminal elements.
For too many years, Nigeria has faced dangerous, shadowy enemies whose sole aim is to overturn our democratic and peaceful way of life. Despite their efforts, we hold dear to the vision of a nation stronger yet, but just, prosperous yet. The task before you is compelling as it is vital, more so than any other institution of government. The fate of our beloved nation rests in the hand of our armed forces.
The president also commented on the Kaduna aero bombing of civilians, which he described as unfortunate.
It is severely painful to see harm befalling those whom we have sworn to protect. Such incidents must be thoroughly investigated.
The Chief of Army Staff and the Minister of Defense both promised to end the prevailing insecurity in parts of the country.
We will continue strengthening our operational capabilities, enhancing intelligence gathering, fostering interagency cooperation, and prioritizing the welfare of our personnel.
We will end insecurity in the nearest future.
The state governor, Babagana Zulum, on his part says the only way to achieve lasting peace in the northeast region is for the army to sustain its current tempo in the fight against insurgents.
Accessibility is key to winning the war against terrorists, insurgency in our region because of the vastness of the area and the remoteness of our communities from each other.
President Bola Tinubu has assured the Nigerian Armed Forces that his administration will continue to do more in improving the living conditions and welfare of officers and men for a better service delivery. Jesse Tafida, TVC News, Maiduguri.
Let's take a short break, and when we return, it will be time to speak with our guest of the day, who is a startup business lawyer and financial analyst, Omori Adogawari, for discussion on Dangote Refinery, appropriate pricing and product availability. Let's stay with Politics Tonight. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Last week, the Dangote Refinery received its maiden 1 million barrels of Agbami crude grade from the Shell International Trading and Shipping Company Limited. And since May, when former President Muhammadu Buhari commissioned the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote Refinery, Nigerians have been patiently waiting for this big moment, especially as government pins its hopes of ending fuel imports, largely on the completion of the refinery. I mean, analysts, experts have called this milestone a game changer. And so tonight, we're focused on appropriate pricing and product availability. Joining me for more perspective into this development is a startup business lawyer and financial analyst, Omori Edogiawere. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Always a pleasure having you on Politics Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Right. A $19 billion investment, now regarded as Africa's largest oil refinery and the world's largest single-train facility, received its maiden crude oil of 1 million barrels. Yes. What is the implication of this?
It's exciting for everyone to see that the Dangote Refinery is about to get going. What that also means is it's hoped that we'll have more availability. Will the prices come down? Different factors have to play. But at least we are going to now have homegrown petroleum products available for the Nigerian market. So it's a good thing to see that 19 billion in investment is playing out in actual fruit, is seeing the light of the day with production, because in Nigeria we're not alien to whitewater projects that are commissioned and everybody claps and then you don't see the light of the day. But to see that really they are walking the talk. They need about 6 million barrels to start production. They received 1 million barrels. 5 million are expected in different tranches, and it shows that they are ready for business. So it will definitely impact positively on the economy, on the ease of petroleum supply. That would definitely play a pivotal role in and be a game changer to what's happening. If we look at the antecedents of this company in question, you will see that in every sector that they have come, one of the things that they have done is not just disrupting the market, but also providing availability of products. So definitely the products will
right. So what does this also portend for Nigeria's downstream petroleum industry?
Well, two things. An improved competitiveness, right? So what you're going to now see would be that we're not just going to be dealing from an importation perspective, right? Right now, we'll be producing. Two things will happen. The market itself would receive the relevant push that has been lacking. So a lot of factors have been playing. When it comes to petroleum, there's so many issues that have bedeviled, that industry. But this is a game changer, because for the first time, you're having a predominantly private sector participation in the oil and gas industry, right? And you're not just having them play as exporters or importers, right? They are actually refining and producing for the Nigerian market and also producing for export. So you have two things that will happen. They will attract FX, right? And also in one way or the other, help also shore up our Naira in some transactional means that will be deployed. This is minus the other improvements that will come to the other ancillary sectors that are aligned with the industry. So I think that what you're going to have would be more like a spark, right? There's been some measure of docility, around that space, and a lot of reliance on external factors, right? But this time, it's been done. It's homegrown. It's indigenous to us, right? So that's the biggest thing we expect. That look, this internal spark, right? Bearing in mind our internal realities, right? And also improving our foreign exchange earnings.
Right. So before we get into the impact of this on our currency, can we now categorically say that the cost is now clear for the refinery to begin operations?
Well, they need 6 million. They've only gotten 1 million, right? So what is being celebrated is the fact that they've actually started receiving something, right? We hope that they get the right tranches that they need. They have a capacity for, I think, 650,000 barrels per day, right? So when they get that and they actually start producing, then we're able to gauge, right? But what we've seen is not just cheap talk, but walking the talk. We've received the first installment of 1 million. 5 million is coming, and it is hoped that when that comes, there's going to be a balance.
Right. So much hope has been placed on this refinery. Like I said in my intro, this is to end a fuel supply problem. Is there any cause for alarm on this?
The Nigerian factor. The Nigerian factor. That's my response. We hope that the Nigerian factor does not come to play, right? And you see, unfortunately, our economy for the longest time, and this is because of our reliance on oil as a mainstay, has heavily relied on FX, right? The dollars, the United States dollars, in virtually everything. Up to the extent that even today people are now charging for simple things in dollars, right? Now, at the end of the day, that may also become another albatross. We are hoping that, I know that sometime I was here and I spoke about commodification, right? And I said, look, let's invest something and try to center the transaction around the naira and reduce dependence on the FX. I hope that governments, our fiscal engineers, like I like to call them, are able to sit down with Dangote business team and work out a measure where there would be solid transactions in local currencies, especially indigenous transactions, right? And managing also properly the inflow of foreign exchange, right? And how that multiplier effect will improve on the economy. Definitely that would happen. But, other than that, if they don't get the maths right, if they don't get that properly in place, what will happen will be that they will fall into the same challenges that other businesses, foreign businesses, have fallen into, as making them close shop, right? And then the other aspect of the Nigerian factor, the things we all know, the anyhowness, right? The penchant for pervasive mediocrity, right? Because one of the blessings of this refinery is to boost indigenous employment. But really, how many Nigerians are employable in the technical aspects of the refinery's business? These are the kind of conversations that we're going to be having. How many expatriates are coming in, right? And how is the knowledge transfer going to be done properly to ensure that there's an integration of the Nigerian, for instance, with the passing of the Petroleum Information Act, right? There is some level of indigenous involvement in any petroleum business in this country. But what these foreign companies have continued to cry out for are knowledgeable manpower, knowledgeable indigenous manpower.
Think we do not have that?
Well, I would not say that we do not have that. I would say that we have not honed our skills as well as we should, with the right level of support from government, right? And the political will to ensure that these companies do right by us indigenously, right? Because you want to run a business that's not just profitable, you want to run a business that is sustainable. What are the indices to ensure that your business is profitable and sustainable? Do the manpower play, your human resource capital plays a pivotal role in that space, right? And so one of the challenges I know that the refinery will have would be indigenous manpower, and also ensuring a very fine balance between your technical expatriate workforce and your indigenous workforce. Having a proper knowledge transfer to ensure that, you know, I always say, look, you bring in an expatriate today to provide a service, you should be able to have a Nigerian provide that service in 2 years' time. And if you can't, then there's a problem.
But is this arguable?
Oh, yes. So, really, and I do not want us to deviate from the issue on ground, but if you look at businesses that have been run in Nigeria, right, and if you look at businesses that have sustainably been run through time, you will find that there's a level of, for want of better language, mediocrity that pervades some of these businesses. Right, nepotism, red tapeism, you know, mediocrity, anyhowness, a conscious refusal to be excellent. Emphasis: conscious refusal to be excellent on the basis of several things. Right, and so these are the things that bedevil the public service and that have crept in very dangerously, even in the private sector. And so it takes intentional effort. And there are companies, for instance, right? There are many indigenous companies that are doing well with indigenous manpower, right? You have Transcorp, you have... So but what I'm saying, and the point I think I'm laboring to say, is that there must be proper measures in place to ensure that you have this level of excellence that they are starting with, go through time, right? And then you have a fine dependence on Nigerian manpower. So whatever your expatriate personnel are coming to do, you must have a clean integration and a proper process in place to enable and train indigenous technical skills. So that you are looking at, you know, a company that in a couple of years to come has a solid crop of indigenous talents and manpower to man that refinery and take it to the next level. All
right, I'm happy you went there because I was going to take you up on the impact of this on Nigeria's current unemployment and underemployment status, both in numbers and in percentage.
So the refinery, for instance, is going to be employing over 15,000 people, right? And a lot more indirectly. I would believe that another phase of what they intend to do will include maybe opening retail outlets and you know, going into that retail service. So there is a lot of hope that it will not just boost the indigenous petroleum downstream sector, but even more importantly, the ripple effect in the economy will show with employment. We have an unemployment challenge problem, but I look at sustainability even more than the immediate result, which is the requisite skill sets necessary for. So when we talk about the unemployment challenge, especially when it comes to work, white-collar jobs, right, or even technical jobs, I feel that the biggest problem we have in this part of the world is not unemployment, is unemployability, right? And it's so I have sat down with. I've once employed a computer analyst who has a BSc in computer science from a federal university who has never owned a laptop. And who has never even had hands. So in fact, the first assignment was come and network a system, help with the internal networking. And he looked like Greek. But that person will tell you that she's unemployed. But is she employable? Right? So while definitely it will boost our economy, more people will get more jobs. But the fact is, the hands that are ready to work in this space need the right skills in order for them to not just get the jobs, but keep the jobs and not kill the business. All
right, so talking about sustainability, another issue is supply of crude oil to Dangote Refinery. As a very large facility, how can the country sustain this?
Well, I'm not sure.
With our daily OPEC quota.
I'm not sure that Dangote has, the company has built their business around waiting for government sustenance. I'm sure that they would have looked at the indices. And already you know that our country today, so what Dangote is going to be doing and what that refinery is going to be providing would be to fill the gap that government has been unable to fill. All our refineries, none is working, right? So there is a gap that he's coming in to fill. I think the question would be if he even will have the capacity to fill that gap. Because if he's not just producing, not him now, the company is not just producing for indigenous use. And even if it's for indigenous use, you have a sizable population, right? But it's also producing for exports. Because if we don't export, we don't attract effects. And attracting effects is very pivotal to the growth of the economy, right? Because of our large dependence on effects, right? So I think that the question would be whether he will even have the capacity to provide what is enough to fill that gap.
So based on an argument I heard somewhere, is Dangote compelled to sell all of its products to Nigeria?
You cannot compel a person to. So Nigeria is a free enterprise country, right? Which means that businesses are allowed to thrive within the space that they understand and without unnecessary inhibitions by government, right? Unlike some jurisdictions where you can't even do business, government has to do the business, right? But I'm sure that as a result of the level of commitment that government has given, and I'm sure you also know that government is also, via NNPC, a shareholder in, the refinery. So I know that there are indices in place and a percentage arrangement that have to be provided. I think that what Dangote is focused on and what the company intends to do is 40% export and 60% internal use, right? So there are bigger issues beyond even compelling. Like I said, we've spoken earlier to the effect on the downstream sector and the effect on the economy and the effect on even on the labor and workforce, right? So he already has a market here. So the issue is not about the market. He already has a solid market here. And so it's a win-win. Whether or not he's compelled to sell everything here or sell a part and export will be a product of an arrangement. But I think that they have that arrangement for 40% to be exports.
All right, so, but do you think NNPC will be able to supply enough crude to Dangote Refinery? And this is majorly because of the kind of challenge we have when it comes to oil theft in Nigeria. So oil theft is a Nigerian problem, a very dangerous one that has seeped really deep into the fiber of everything that we have done. And that is, remember I said to you when you pointed out earlier, I said I hope that the Nigerian factor does not become a problem. And this is one of the challenges you have, the internal sabotage that comes. But this is where we also expect the armed forces, especially the Navy, to step up to ensure that we plug those holes. Can we plug the holes extensively in permanence? Maybe not 100%, but at least there definitely would be an improvement, right? I think that also the fact that Dangote is an indigenous company, so it's our own. Now, this is not saying it is even right in any way, right, to steal the commonwealth of the country. And the law is very clear. Mineral resources belong to the federal government. So even if it's in your land, it doesn't belong to you, right? But then we all must now come together to support this business to thrive. Anything to the contrary will not just be sabotage to the company, even to the government, but even to yourself, changing yourself. So it is hoped that the price of the unit price of petroleum products may come down, but there are so many factors that revolve around that. But even beyond that, the fact is that now we are producing locally to serve ourselves locally as against exporting crude and then importing refined products.
But the issue of stopping oil theft is that for the security agencies to look at decisively, and also to weed out sabotage, any factors or persons that could sabotage that process, right? And it's a long journey, and it's not something that one government can look at. And this is why I would always say, establish institutional mechanisms and framework, and not powerful leaders or powerful directors, but have powerful institutions, powerful measures in place to ensure that certain things don't repeat themselves.
All right, so for the purpose of our wider audience, let's talk about the impact of the NNPCL's 20% stake.
Sorry?
Let's talk about the impact of NNPC's 20% stake. What does it mean?
That's Nigeria's stake, right? So you can't have that kind of, remember, I have pointed out that there is a vacuum. None of our refineries are working, right? And so much money keeps going into maintenance and the likes, and we're still importing. Now, you have a private sector person coming in to say, look, I can break this jinx, but I need the involvement of government, right? I need political will and support, and then some measure of involvement. So it's only right, any wise government seeing that kind of investment and the level of promise that it has will jump to be a part of it. So NNPC's 20% stake, 20% is a lot for this kind of entity. It's a lot. It's not a shareholding that is that can be shoved aside, right? Not a walk in the park to own 20% of this sort of refinery. So it's expected that that will give them a seat on the board, right? That will give them some measure of contribution to the administration or the process that the company intends to take in its service delivery, right? And I do hope that, there is a balance of that relationship. Why they learn best practice from the private sector perspective, that goes to be applied by them in the public sector, even though NNPC is deemed to be private now, right? And also, the company, Dangote as a group, also would learn and have the support and backing of government. Because, look, this is government, so they're not really working as private sector persons alone. They have the backing of government. Government is part of them, right? And so it will help weed away some of the internal bottlenecks that they will face, especially as production begins, as supply begins. The supply chain is a lot, right? And this is a government, every government has regulations, right? Every government has various sectors regulating various aspects of every supply chain in any business. So being a business that has active involvement of the representative of government would definitely help smoothen the process.
Right. So some analysts have also raised the issue of currency to be used in the supply of crude oil to Dangote by NNPCL. What's your take on the use of naira on dollar?
Well, we're in Nigeria. We're Nigerians. And naira has suffered a lot of bashing, right? So anything that can be done to help shore it up, right, is a welcome development. But what you also have to look at, what is the global language when it comes to currency transactions? What is the global direction, right? And how strong is the naira, especially when it comes to such large volume, large bandwidth transactions. But definitely, it will even be an anomaly, really, for you to be in Nigeria and be transacting in USD. So if we want to really put our money where the mouth is, the right thing to do would be to strengthen the naira by transacting in the naira. Remember, I mentioned commodification. So look, make the naira important. Let the transaction be based on the naira, right? Analysts will say, oh, that may be dangerous. That may lead to certain issues, may affect forecasts may affect also third-party markets or foreign exchange markets, especially as it has to do with the company and its sourcing for supplies and all that. But I think every other challenge is secondary to the fact that we need to enhance the Naira. And if anything, if that is one of the things that the refinery comes to do for us by virtue of its launch, right, it would not be out of the way. It will not be out of the way, yeah.
All right. Let's take a break, Mr. Mori. I've been speaking with a startup business lawyer, an economist and financial analyst, and tonight we focused on Dangote Refinery, appropriate pricing and product availability. We'll take a break now, and this conversation will return when I come back. Please stay with us.
In the month of December, the 1st is World AIDS Day, while the 2nd of December is International Day for the Abolition of Slavery. On the 3rd is International Day of Persons with Disabilities. On the 4th of December, attention shifts as the day is dedicated to World Wildlife Conservation. The 7th is International Civil Aviation Day, and on the 9th is International Anti-Corruption Day. On the 10th is Human Rights Day, and on the 21st is World Basketball Day. 25th is Christmas Day, when Christians celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. The day after is Boxing Day, which is on the 26th, and on the 31st is New Year's Eve. Brace yourself and tune in to TVC News for in-depth reporting and analysis on these days. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight, we focused on Dangote Refinery, appropriate pricing and product availability with a startup business lawyer and financial analyst, Omori Edo-Gawuri. Thank you so much, Mr. Omori. Now, let's take this conversation back to sometime in May when the former governor of Central Bank, Godwin Emefiele, says Dangote Refinery will save Nigeria $30 billion in forex yearly. How feasible, how practicable is this?
You're going to reduce importation costs, right? Because you'll be importing less. If you import less, you spend less, right? I think that, so oftentimes, why there's such a disconnect between the laymen, we the laymen, and those at the top of the financial engineering space is the highfalutin approach to simple issues, right? Nigeria today is largely dependent on importation of petroleum products. If somebody now says, I will produce indigenously, what that means is that we would not be importing. That would reduce drastically the quantity that we are importing. What is the currency that we use to import? FX. So if you reduce importation, you reduce FX. Now, there are other indices and there are other factors that also come to play, which will be mitigated by virtue of the fact that an indigenous player has now come into the market, right? So I think that, you know, I can't speak for him. He's no longer able to even really further explain what he means by that. There is a new sheriff in town as far as the CBN is concerned, and they will have their own ideas as to how Dangote should work and the value it will bring to the table in the economy. But I think that the key thing is, look, we are going to be producing more locally. And if we are producing locally now, and we are refining and selling locally, then we'll reduce how much we are spending on importing.
But do you think the refinery can boost availability of petrol when it begins operation?
It will. It will, but the quantum is the issue, right? But it's a work in progress, right? But I think that, so remember when the president came on and subsidy was removed, one of the things that happened was petroleum consumption went from 50-something million liters to 13-point-something million liters. Within about a month, what happened? Those that were profiting off subsidy and all that and blowing up figures and taking petroleum products outside were run out of business, right? And then we began to have the real figures. What that also means is that we're not, how much are we consuming, right? So I think that you're going to have more. You know, it's easier if something is produced in your backyard here, more will